What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel all about real estate. My name is Lewis, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 very common home buyer mistakes. They are so common, in fact, that I have actually fallen victim to each one of these myself. So I'm going to go through each one of those step by step. I'm going to explain them to you in detail, and hopefully by the end of the video, you're going to have a really good idea on how to avoid them. Now, if you are new to the channel and you like all things finance, real estate, and investing, please consider smashing that like button. It really helps grow and promote the channel, and tap that subscribe button to see more weekly videos just like this. Let's begin. Mistake number 1, understanding the difference between what you qualify for and what you feel comfortable with on a monthly basis. They are 2 totally separate things. So this is something that happens all the time, and it happened to me as well. Originally, when I went to go get pre-approved for the first home that I ever bought, I went to a lender, I filled out an application, they ran my credit, they took a look at my income, and they actually approved me for more than what I thought I could afford on a monthly basis. And initially, I was taken back by that, and I thought, oh wow, cool. I can expand the budget, I can actually afford a little bit more. But the problem with that mindset is that the lenders only look at specific things, and they are only looking at your gross monthly income if you are a W-2 wage earner. So let me give you a hypothetical example with numbers that are super simple. Let's say you earn before tax, you're a W-2 wage earner, and you earn $10,000 per month. A lender can qualify you with up to approximately a 45% debt to income ratio. And in some cases, it can be dramatically higher than that, but for purposes of discussion, we'll go with 45%. That basically means that out of your $10,000 of gross income, which is before tax, the lender will allow you to have a housing expense, along with other monthly obligations that show up on your credit report, things like credit cards, car payments, student loans, up to 45% of that monthly income. In other words, $4,500 per month. So let's say you have a couple car payments and some student loans that total $1,500 a month, then the lender can essentially qualify you for a $3,000 housing expense. With that said, the housing expense that the lender is looking at is only your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and maybe any association dues. But they are not accounting for other things like utility costs, cell phone bills, auto insurance, and things like that. Those are totally excluded from your ratios. And what happens is that you may earn $10,000 a month, but your net income might only be 75%. So if you qualify up to the maximum level of, let's say, a 45% debt to income ratio, it may actually put a lot of pressure on your monthly budget when it comes down to your discretionary spending. So it's something really to be aware of. The way to avoid this is actually very simple. It's to come up with a monthly budget, understand what all of your expenses look like, and then work backwards from there to determine your comfort level for your monthly housing expense. Now that brings us to mistake number 2, which is not understanding the operating costs of the property. So what I've found is that many people who are purchasing a home to live in, they do not really look or analyze the operating costs of a property. Many investors do, but a lot of times somebody who's just purchasing a home to live in doesn't really consider it. However, I believe that it is very, very important. So what is the cost to operate the property? Well, it's several items, and what I would highly encourage anyone to do is just make an Excel spreadsheet or take out a little notepad and start jotting things down. But things like your electricity, your gas, your water, your sewer, your garbage, your cable TV, your internet. I would budget for maintenance. I would budget for any potential repairs or even lawn care. And then any other miscellaneous items that you think might need to be included into that basket is what I would consider the cost to actually operate that property. Now, in many cases, depending on your market and where you're located at, those expenses could be $300, $400, $700, $800 per month, and it is a sizable chunk of income that is not factored into your housing expense when you go to qualify for a loan or when you're budgeting to make that purchase. So even though this is not financial advice, for me personally, when I consider a property, I'm looking at not only the monthly payment, but I'm also factoring in the operating costs of that property. So if I feel comfortable, let's say, with a mortgage payment that is $2,000 per month, then I need to evaluate the operating costs. And let's say they're going to be $700 per month. I need to feel comfortable going into that purchase, understanding that my housing expense will actually be approximately $2,700. Mistake number 3, depleting your savings and not leaving enough financial runway or emergency fund in the event that something happens. So this is something that can be a little bit tricky because housing prices are so high right now, and it can be very challenging to save up enough just to cover the down payment and the closing costs in the transaction. In many cases, depending on your market or what your credit profile looks like, you may need anywhere from 3 to 20% down on a property, plus an additional maybe 2 to 3% of the purchase price to cover any closing costs. And so what happens is that if you take your account balance down to at or near zero, and then any miscellaneous expense comes up, let's say you have a water heater go out or an HVAC system goes out, which can really cost you thousands of dollars to repair, it can put yourself in a financial pinch where you may be forced to use a credit card or finance one of those repairs. And it can be really, really stressful, especially when you're just getting into a property. In addition to that, the economy can shift slightly. Let's say you have a high-paying commission sales job and sales are down this quarter and your commission goes down. It can put you in a tough spot if you don't leave yourself some kind of a buffer. So now, obviously, this isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of situation. You're going to have to evaluate your personal situation for yourself and figure out what works best for you. But ideally, it's always nice to have maybe a 3 to 6 month financial runway set aside in your emergency fund for anything that comes up just like this. Now, if you are not in a position where you can do that, but you still want to move forward with the purchase, maybe you can structure the deal in a fashion where your mortgage loan officer covers all the closing costs so that you don't have to deplete all of your capital, or maybe you can have the seller provide some kind of credit to cover your recurring and non-recurring fees. There are ways to structure it to keep a little bit more money in your pocket, but in general, it's always good to have a little bit left over in the tank just in case something that you didn't expect comes up. Mistake number 4, not budgeting for moving expenses, renovations, furniture, and appliances. So if you've made it this far in the video, you're probably noticing a theme here surrounding budgeting and having a little bit extra cash on hand for things like maintenance and repairs and miscellaneous items. Well, this one is really no different. And one of the reasons I think this is so important is because even though some people will consider what these costs will be, a lot of times they are severely underestimated. Cost for labor has gone up, cost for materials have gone up. And so even if you're doing some very basic renovations on a home, like painting, or you want to install some luxury vinyl plank or some nice wood floors or something like that, the cost of labor and materials has risen greatly over even just the last 12 months, which means that a lot of those repairs and renovations can be way more expensive than maybe you were originally planning. In addition to that, the cost to move can be really expensive as well. So a couple things to consider. Are you going to be hiring movers? Will you be doing it yourself? If you are doing it yourself, are you going to be renting a truck? Do you have family or people that will help facilitate that move? And then, of course, when you get into your new home, a lot of times you don't want to use the furniture that you had from the previous home. You want to go ahead and furnish it with beautiful new furniture and pick out some decor and kind of set it up the way you want. And so that is an added expense to kind of account for as well. And then in many cases, certain appliances don't come with the purchase of that home as well. Very typical that you will not have a fridge at that property or a washer and dryer. But, a lot of times the stove tops and the dishwashers and stuff, those will be included in the sale. So it's one of those things that you just want to make sure that you're aware of it, that you budget for it, and you know exactly what you're going to be getting into once you close escrow. All right, last but not least, mistake number 5 is not considering the time horizon. And what I mean by that is what works for you today may not work for you in 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years down the line. So it's really important to consider things like size and location and school districts, and then of course what you plan to do with that property long term. Is it a home that you plan to live in for 3 to 5 years, sell it, and then trade up to a bigger property in a different location? Or is it something that you're considering to hold long term and maybe keep it as a rental? And if you plan to keep it as a rental, what does the operating costs look like? Just like what we talked about earlier. What is the current market rents? Is there a lot of demand in that area? Is it a home that fits a sort of rental profile? You may want to consider, the size and the square footage and the demand in that particular market. There's going to be a huge difference in demand for, let's say, a 6-bedroom, 4-bath, 4,000 square foot house in a luxury market than there will be for, let's say, more of a starter home that is 1,700 square feet and it is a 3-bed, 2-bath. So you kind of want to compare the two, consider what you plan to do with the property long term, and then make an educated decision based on that. All right, so that is going to wrap it up for today's video. But as I mentioned in the beginning, I have made every single one of these mistakes myself. So I did want to leave you with a little summary. So first, it starts with the monthly budget. I ended up purchasing a home that was a little bit more expensive because I could qualify for it as opposed to what I could actually afford. So I went ahead and I stretched the budget a little bit because I thought I would ultimately be okay. But then the second mistake that I made was that I did not account for the cost to operate the property, including the utilities. So my mortgage payment, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance was slightly higher than I originally wanted, which really wasn't much of an issue. However, the utility costs and the maintenance on that property was way higher. I mean, once I accounted for the electricity and gas, sewer, water, garbage, the internet, the TV. I mean, it was upwards of $500-$600 a month. I had no idea it was going to cost that much money. So it was way more expensive than I thought that it would be. Something I had never really looked into before I purchased my first home. Now, the other mistake that I made is the property that I purchased was a fixer-upper, and I originally had inspections done, and we took a look at the property. We figured we would do some light cosmetic work, and in total, we thought, oh, it'll cost somewhere around $20,000 to fix this property up. Well, it ended up costing $40,000 because as we started pulling things up, like the flooring or pulling apart bathrooms, there were other issues that were unforeseen that we did not know about. So the budget doubled there, which depleted more and more of my savings, which left me with a lower financial runway, which really at the time squeezed me. And then the last thing that I really didn't dig into enough was the time horizon. Initially, I thought to myself, oh, I could easily live in this property for 5 to 10 years, and then I could eventually turn it into a rental. But what ended up really happening was that I was a little too far away from family, and then I was further away from my friends and a lot of the businesses and the restaurants that I like to frequent on a regular basis. So I'd oftentimes be driving 20, 30, 40 minutes to go to some of these restaurants and meet up with friends. And then, of course, the place that I ended up working at was about a 40-minute drive, depending on traffic as well. So over time, it ended up becoming harder to justify living in that specific area. Now, that was just specific to me and my personal situation, but it's something that I really didn't foresee coming. And of course, life happens, things change. But at the time, I thought, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm in the location I want. I love this area. And, I just didn't fully understand or think it through. So anyway, that is all I have for you here today. Leave your comments below. What do you think about these mistakes? Have you made any yourself? Are you willing to share? Leave it in the comments below. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe to see more weekly videos just like this. Thank you so much. Take care.